Welcome, everyone. My name is Megan Beeker, and this is my analysis of a case study for School Law 850. So, a summary of the report. This incident takes place in a small rural K-8 school named St. Regis School. We found out that St. Regis has a very active stakeholder base, such as an active parent-teacher association, and much of the money for the school is raised through two large fundraisers a year. There has been more of a focus on technology at St. Regis, and much of the money has gone to a computer lab and software for students to use. The teachers and students have enjoyed the new software so much that they have asked their media specialist, Mrs. Lynn, to make copies for classroom use. There are two teachers per grade level. Mrs. Brandon, who is new to the St. Regis School District, does not feel comfortable using the copied software and has made it known to her principal, Mr. Sample. Mrs. Lynn, Mrs. Evans, who is the PTA president, and other teachers appreciate and support the copied software because it saves hard-earned money for the school. A law and ethics report. Obviously, the major concern has to do with the legal violation of making copies of the software when we don't have enough licenses for those copies. It is a major copyright concern, and if the software company found out, it could cost the school and all parties involved thousands upon millions of dollars. I do have major ethical concerns involving those who think that they won't be caught and are unconcerned about these copies when it could lead to the financial downfall of the school. I do stand with Mrs. Brandon, and though it's only a few copies, they are still guilty of violating copyright agreement as stated in the software usage agreement, and turning a blind eye raises major ethical concerns. The major concern I see here is that Mrs. Lynn took it upon herself to create and distribute several pirated copies of software for each classroom. She did not consult the principal before making these copies and does not see why this is a concern as she is trying to save the school some money. I appreciate her efforts to try to put this helpful software into the hands of many more teachers. She just went about the whole situation in the wrong way, and she should have consulted and communicated with the building principal before making the decision to make these copies. So here are the facts. The enrollment of St. Regis School is 420 students, and it only requires 2 teachers per grade. So we're talking about 18 classroom teachers and then 2 special education teachers. It's 25 miles to the closest city and is in a rural, tight-knit community that doesn't openly welcome strangers and outsiders. As someone not from St. Regis, Mr. Sample has worked very hard to build up his credibility in the St. Regis community for the past 3 years. The St. Regis School has a very active parent-teacher association who works very hard to help raise the proper funds and support the school in any way that they can. Mrs. Lynn took it upon herself to make several copies of all the software purchased for classroom use, even though it violates the software usage agreement. Mrs. Brandon brought it to Mr. Sample's attention and wants nothing to do with the copied software. Many teachers and parents seem to be okay with using it as it saves our school money and helps everyone. Mrs. Lynn also doesn't understand what the big deal is, as no one will know or find out that the software was copied, which raises ethical concerns. So looking over this situation, the major concern that I see out of the gate involves the illegal action of copying the software. Though it's a small school and the likelihood of the software publisher finding out is probably slim, it's still a major concern for Mr. Sample and others involved in the school. This is something that could easily force the school to become defunct if the software company chooses to pursue legal action and raises major concerns for me. The other side of this involves a very active community that seems to support the school at any cost. Budget and stretching their dollars seems to be something that they are all very conscientious of, and I can see some community members who may not be very understanding when talking about the major concern of copyright, or being very upset that someone put our school in that potential financial danger. This could be seen as a situation that questions the ethics of the staff within our school, shedding a negative light on both the school and the community. So some options and potential consequences. So of course, the first thing to look at is that building leaders always have tough choices ahead of them when they're faced with this kind of adversity. The first option involves taking no action, which could lead to potential legal consequences. Another option involves firing or asking Mrs. Lynn to resign from her short-sighted decision, which is the most extreme action that I think could be taken. A third option involves self-reporting the copyright infringement, which could work very well in the school's favor, or it could make the software company very upset, where they will still pursue legal action even though those pirated copies have been destroyed. Other potential options include contacting the company and simply buying more licenses, which will cost the school quite a bit more money, and the budget may not allow it. If the school cannot afford additional licenses and the copies are destroyed, this could cause disgruntled teachers, parents, and stakeholders as they want that software in their classrooms. Also, if we discuss this matter with all stakeholders, we potentially expose ourselves to legal concern, which could be reported for this incident. So naturally, it's really important to evaluate all options and really think about how building leaders can handle this situation. I think taking no action for this incident brings major legal and ethical concerns, so I don't think that the situation can just be ignored altogether. Suggesting that Mrs. Lynn resign or be fired for her actions could create other legal concerns where she files a complaint or sues the school. It would be very interesting to know if anything like this has appeared on her record before, though I think she should know better as a media specialist. Though self-reporting this copyright violation may be tough to do and could still bring legal concern, I think it is the most ethical choice out of this list. This list provides much more reasonable solutions for this particular problem. To me, the best idea would be to buy more licenses for the software that we really want to use or the school really wants to use. It's nice to have additional software around, but they could leave that for the school computer lab instead. This definitely is much more ethical and is the correct legal thing to do. Mr. Sample did the ethical thing by requesting that all copies be destroyed, but it's still not addressing the legal concern of the copies that were made and how much the company could react if they find out. Involving all stakeholders in the discussion is extremely important and will help all understand the potential legal repercussions if they do not follow the software usage agreement, but many may say that it's a risk they're willing to take. There could be many differing ethical opinions about what to do in this situation, and opening the floor could expose the school and staff in a very negative way. So, to me, the best option in this issue involves stressing to our staff, parents, and stakeholders why it is essential that we buy more licenses for students to use. It is the most ethical and legally sound way that we can ensure all students have access to these valuable software programs. Though Mr. Sample has been excellent about building up his credibility in the community, I think it needs to be a community effort where all interested parties, such as teachers, parents, community members, are all part of a committee to research which software programs are best and agree upon the best way to approach choosing and purchasing software in the future. I think this could be a committee that would be necessary for years to come. So, implementation, how would I plan to implement this plan into the St. Regis School District? First and foremost, I think proper communication is key for all parties involved. This situation that could affect the school as a whole. This is a situation that could affect the school as a whole. And I think that being a compassionate but honest leader will be the most important thing for Mr. Sample to do in this situation. Mr. Sample did the right thing by asking for all copies to be collected and destroyed. I think he needs to check over the software usage agreement to see how the situation could be solved, and I think that may involve admitting fault to the software company and discussing what schools can do to make the situation right. It may be as simple as destroying the copies and buying more licenses. I think that bringing a committee together to discuss why this happened, why it was wrong, and what we can do in the future to avoid this situation altogether would be the final important piece of the puzzle. I think school handbook policies need to be checked over, and I also think that future professional development about copyrights, Legal and ethical issues need to be addressed as well. I also think that a professional face to face discussion needs to take place with Mrs. Lynn. Mr. Sample needs to take a firm but compassionate stance on the matter, ask the hard questions, and discuss why this kind of situation can never happen again. If Mrs. Lynn is open and receptive to change, there will be no need to ask her to resign. She needs to understand how serious her offense is, and she needs to be sure to check with the administration before making a decision that could put the school in financial ruin. If she openly disagrees and decides to defy the law again, I think Mr. Sample will have no choice but to recommend that she be asked to resign due or that she has to that she choose to resign due to the ethical concern. Administrators and building leaders always need backup plans, so I think it's important to discuss narrowing down software programs to a few essential programs, fundraising more money for technology use, or looking for free and less expensive options for software programs. I also think it's essential to look at the professional development related to copyright as well as handbook language to ensure that this incident does not happen again. And that way, St. Regis School is prepared to let teachers know that they take copyright violations very seriously in the school and that they do not want this kind of situation to happen again. I would look to see what other school handbooks say on their use of technology and there's what for their school and what kind of repercussions take place if anyone does not follow the technology guidelines in place by the school. Ultimately, building leaders should want their school to thrive and be successful, and sometimes it takes situations like this for all stakeholders and building leaders to see just how important it is to reflect on policies and procedures to ensure the school is continuing to grow and flourish. Communication and expectations will help St. Regis School be successful for many years to come. Thank you for your time and attention.